The lecture hall buzzed with different voices, speaking in various alien languages. Yuna sat in the back corner of the advanced xenobiology classroom, her dark eyes focused on her tablet screen. Her fingers moved quietly across the device as she took notes. Around her, students from 12 different species filled the curved rows of seats. The morning light from the station's artificial sun streamed through the large windows. It cast long shadows across the room where beings of all shapes and sizes gathered to learn. Some had scales that shimmered like jewels. Others had multiple arms or eyes that glowed in the dim corners. A few floated in special tanks filled with breathing fluid. Yuna looked perfectly ordinary among them. She wore simple dark clothes and kept her black hair tied back in a neat ponytail. Her face showed no emotion as she listened to the conversations around her. To anyone watching, she seemed like just another quiet human student trying to fit in. Near the front of the room, Kepler clicked her mandibles together in what passed for laughter among her insect-like species. Her forearms gestured wildly as she spoke to a group of other students. "I still cannot believe the Federation let the humans join us so quickly," Kepler said, her voice carrying a sharp edge. "They have only been in space for, 200 years? My people were building starships when their species was still living in caves." A student with blue-scaled skin nodded in agreement. "The humans seem so soft and weak. No natural armor. No enhanced strength, no special abilities. What exactly do they bring to our advanced civilization?" Yuna's fingers paused for just a moment on her tablet. Then she continued typing, her expression unchanged. The massive doors at the front of the classroom slid open with a soft hiss. Professor Vexthor entered the room, his reptilian form moving with practiced grace. His scales were a deep green color that seemed to shift in the light. 2 yellow eyes swept across the room, taking in each student with careful attention. "Good morning, class," Professor Vexthor said, his voice carrying a slight hiss on certain words. "Today we will discuss your final assignment for this semester." The room fell silent. Even the floating students stopped their gentle movements in their tanks. Professor Vexthor activated the large display screen behind him. Images of a toxic purple moon appeared, covered in strange crystal formations that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "You will be conducting field research on Kepler 442 bits, he announced. "This moon is home to one of the most dangerous ecosystems in our local sector. The surface radiation can kill most species within hours without proper protection. The native crystal spiders are highly territorial and extremely aggressive." Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few whispered concerns to their neighbors. "The crystal formations emit a unique type of energy that interferes with most scanning equipment," the professor continued. "This means you will need to collect samples and data manually. You will work in groups of 4 to ensure safety." Hands and various appendages rose around the room as students began forming teams. The insectoid students clustered together. The aquatic species formed their own group. Even the human students started gathering near each other. Yuna remained seated, watching the screen with calm interest. Professor Vexthor looked around the room, noting which students had not yet joined a group. His yellow eyes finally settled on the quiet human girl in the back corner. "Miss Yuna," he said, "you have not selected a team." Every head in the room turned to look at her. Yuna closed her tablet and stood up slowly. Her voice was soft but clear when she spoke. "I would prefer to work alone, Professor." A murmur of surprise rippled through the classroom. Kethera's mandibles clicked again, but this time it sounded more like concern than amusement. "The assignment is dangerous," Professor Vexthor warned. "Working alone is not recommended, especially for a human." Yuna nodded politely. "I understand the risks, Professor, but I'd work better by myself." Professor Vexthor studied her for a long moment. Something in her calm demeanor made him pause. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, but you will follow all safety protocols exactly." "Of course," Yuna replied, sitting back down. As the class ended and students began filing out, a young human male approached her seat. Jiho had been watching her throughout the semester, always sitting a few rows ahead. His concern for the quiet girl was obvious on his face. "Yuna, wait," he called out as she gathered her things. "Are you sure about going alone? That moon sounds really dangerous." She looked up at him with dark eyes that seemed older than her 22 years. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Then she smiled, but the expression did not quite reach her eyes. "I appreciate your concern, Jiho," she said softly, "but I really do prefer working alone. I am used to it." She walked past him toward the door, leaving Jiho standing there with more questions than answers. As she disappeared into the busy corridor, he could not shake the feeling that there was much more to the quiet girl than anyone realized. The research station orbited Kepler 442 bits like a metal spider hanging in the void. Through the transport ship's windows, students pressed their faces against the glass to get their first look at the toxic moon below. The purple surface glowed with an eerie light that came from massive crystal formations scattered across the landscape. Yuna sat quietly in her seat, reading through safety protocols on her tablet. While other students chattered nervously about the upcoming mission, she seemed completely calm. Her dark eyes moved across the screen with steady focus, absorbing every detail about the moon's dangerous environment. "Look at the size of those crystal spires," whispered a blue-scaled student named Orcs. "Some of them must be over 1,000 meters tall." Kethera clicked her mandibles together as she studied the moon's surface. "The radiation readings are incredible. My species' natural armor should protect me, but even I will need extra shielding." The aquatic student Nalheen floated in her portable tank, watching the moon through her transparent aluminum walls. Her large eyes moved between the deadly landscape below and the quiet human girl who seemed unbothered by the obvious dangers they would soon face. Professor Vexthor's voice came through the ship's communication system. "We will be docking with the research station in 15 minutes. All students must complete their equipment checks and safety reviews before we begin surface operations." The station's docking bay was filled with specialized gear designed to keep various alien species alive in the moon's hostile environment. Radiation suits hung in rows, each one designed for different body types and species requirements. Environmental scanners, sample collection tools, and emergency beacons were arranged on metal tables. Yuna picked up a standard human radiation suit without any hesitation. She examined it briefly, then began putting it on with smooth, practiced movements. Her hands moved over the suit's controls and safety systems like she had worn similar equipment many times before. Jiho struggled with his own suit nearby, fumbling with the complex sealing mechanisms. "These things are so complicated," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead as he tried to connect the air filtration system. "Need help?" Yuna asked softly, moving over to assist him. Her fingers quickly adjusted his suit's settings and checked the seal integrity. "There, that should keep you safe down there." Jiho looked at her with surprise. "How did you learn to do that so fast?" "This is my first time using one of these suits." Yuna shrugged. "I read the manual carefully. The instructions are pretty clear if you follow them step by step." But Nalheen, floating nearby in her tank, noticed something that Joe missed. Yuna's movements had been too quick, too sure. She had not fumbled with any of the controls or hesitated over any of the safety procedures. Her hands had moved with the confidence of someone who had worn such equipment many times before. The first surface expedition began 2 hours later. Most students stayed close to the heavily shielded observation pods that the station provided. These metal shelters were equipped with powerful energy shields and advanced scanning equipment. They offered maximum protection from both the radiation and the dangerous wildlife that lived among the crystals. Yuna walked away from the main group, carrying only basic sample collection tools and a portable scanner. She moved across the purple landscape with steady steps, avoiding the areas where radiation readings spiked highest. Her suit's warning systems remained quiet while other students' equipment beeped constantly with danger alerts. The crystal formations rose around her like frozen lightning. Each one pulsed with inner light that cast strange shadows across the toxic ground. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy that could kill an unprotected person in minutes. Kepler watched from her observation pod as Yuna knelt beside a cluster of smaller crystals. Is she crazy? She is working right next to a high radiation zone without any extra shielding. Professor Vexthor monitored all the students from the main control pod. His yellow eyes tracked Yuna's movements across multiple scanner displays. Her vital signs remained completely normal despite her proximity to dangerous energy sources. Interesting, he hissed softly to himself. Nalene had positioned her tank near a window that gave her a clear view of the human girl. She watched as Yuna moved between the crystal formations with careful steps that seemed to follow a specific pattern. The girl was not wandering randomly or exploring blindly. She was moving with purpose, like someone who understood exactly what she was looking for. A movement caught everyone's attention. A crystal spider emerged from a crack in the ground near Orcs' observation pod. The creature was the size of a large dog, with legs made of living crystal and eyes that glowed like purple stars. Its body sparkled as it moved, beautiful and deadly at the same time. Orcs panicked inside his pod, hitting buttons randomly as the spider approached to shelter. The creature's crystalline claws scraped against the pod's hull, testing its defenses. Yuna looked up from her sample collection. She saw the spider and the terrified student. Without any sign of alarm, she picked up a small rock and threw it in a gentle arc that landed several meters away from the pod. The crystal spider's head turned toward the sound. It abandoned the pod immediately and scurried toward the noise, following its natural hunting instincts. Lucky throw, Yuna said quietly to herself, returning to her work as if nothing had happened. But Nalene's large eyes had tracked the entire sequence. The throw had not been lucky. It had been perfectly calculated to draw the spider away without startling it into aggressive behavior. Yuna had known exactly how the creature would react. The question was, how did a quiet student know so much about one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators? The accident happened so quickly that nobody saw it coming. Orcs was trying to collect a sample from what looked like a small crystal formation when his scanner malfunctioned. The device sent out a high-pitched pulse that echoed across the purple landscape like a dinner bell. For a moment, everything was silent. Even the constant hum of radiation seemed to pause. Then the ground began to shake. Cracks appeared in the crystal formations around them. Purple light leaked out from underground spaces that nobody knew existed. The light grew brighter and brighter until it hurt to look at directly. Everyone get back to the pods immediately. Professor Vexthor's voice crackled through their communication systems. His usual calm tone carried a sharp edge of fear. But it was too late. Crystal spiders poured out of the cracks like liquid diamond. Dozens of them emerged from their hidden nest, each one larger than the creature they had seen earlier. Their crystalline bodies reflected the purple light in all directions, creating a dazzling display that made it hard to see clearly. The largest spider was the size of a small vehicle. Its legs were thick as tree branches and made of pure living crystal. Eyes like purple suns burned in its angular head as it surveyed the area for threats to its territory. Kepler screamed as three smaller spiders surrounded her observation pod. Her four arms worked frantically at the controls, trying to activate the pod's defensive systems. The spider's claws were designed by evolution to crack open the hardest materials. They began tearing through the pod's armor like it was made of paper. The shields are not working, Orcs shouted into his communicator. These things are cutting right through them. Other students scrambled toward the research station's emergency shelter, but the spiders moved faster than any of them expected. The creatures flowed across the landscape like a crystalline tide, cutting off escape routes and surrounding the observation pods. Jiho found himself trapped between two medium-sized spiders. His radiation suit's warning system screamed as the creature's claws sparked against the ground near his feet. He backed against a crystal formation, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it through his helmet. "Help!" he called out, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. The massive spider queen moved toward Kepler's damaged pod. The insectoid student's forearms had stopped working the controls. She pressed herself against the back wall of her shelter, clicking her mandibles in a pattern that meant terror in her species language. The spider queen reared up on its back legs, preparing to deliver a killing blow that would crush the pod completely. That was when Yuna moved. She had been standing perfectly still near a cluster of samples she had collected. While everyone else panicked and ran, she remained calm and motionless. Now she walked forward with steady steps, reaching into her equipment pack. She pulled out what looked like a simple sample collection tool. It was designed for taking small pieces of crystal without damaging the specimens. In her hands, it looked like exactly what it was supposed to be, a harmless scientific instrument. The Spider Queen sensed movement and turned its burning purple eyes toward the approaching human. It towered over Yuna, easily 3 times her height. Its crystalline claws could slice through metal, and its bite could inject toxins that would kill most species in seconds. Yuna looked up at the massive creature without any sign of fear. Then she moved. Her motion was so fast that most of the watching students missed it completely. One moment she was standing calmly in front of the Spider Queen. The next moment, she was beside it, and her sample collection tool was buried deep in a specific spot just behind the creature's head. The Spider Queen made a sound like breaking glass. Its massive body shuddered once, then collapsed to the ground with a crash that shook the nearby crystal formations. All the other spiders stopped moving immediately. They turned toward their fallen queen, then looked at the small human who stood calmly beside the body. Without making any aggressive moves, they began retreating back into their underground tunnels. Within minutes, the landscape was quiet again. Yuna pulled her tool free and wiped it clean on a cloth from her pack. She looked around at the shocked faces staring at her from the observation pods and emergency shelters. "Lucky shot," she said softly, her voice carrying clearly through the communication system. But everyone who had witnessed what happened knew it had not been luck. The strike had been placed with surgical precision in the exact spot that would sever the creature's main neural cluster, a spot that most xenobiology textbooks did not even mention existed. Kepler climbed out of her damaged pod on shaking legs. She looked at Yuna with new eyes, seeing something she had missed before. "Who are you?" she whispered. Yuna did not answer. She simply returned to collecting her samples, acting as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Back aboard the Academy station, word spread quickly through the student population. The quiet human girl who never spoke in class had somehow killed a crystal spider queen with nothing more than a sample collection tool. Students gathered in small groups in the corridors, whispering about what they had witnessed. Kepler found herself the center of attention wherever she went. Other insectoid students approached her with clicking mandibles, asking for details about her rescue. But every time she tried to explain what had happened, she found herself struggling for words. The human just walked up to the queen like it was nothing. She told a group of her friends in the dining hall. She did not run or scream or panic. She looked at that massive creature like she was examining a specimen in a laboratory. "But how did she know where to strike?" asked another student. "Crystal spider anatomy is not covered until advanced courses. Even then, most professors only discuss their basic structure." Kepler's mandibles clicked uncertainly. "I do not know." The strike was so precise, so perfect. It was like she had killed those creatures before. Professor Vexthor sat in his office late that evening, scrolling through Yuna's academic records on his computer screen. Her file showed excellent grades in all subjects and perfect attendance. Her background check had been completed by Federation security before she was accepted to the Academy. Everything appeared completely normal. Born on Earth's colony world of New Sol, parents were both civilian engineers. No military service in her family history. No combat training listed anywhere in her educational background. She had applied to the xenobiology program through standard civilian channels, and her entrance examinations showed exceptional knowledge of alien life forms. But something bothered him about the way she had moved on the moon's surface. Her confidence, her calmness, the surgical precision of her attack. These were not the actions of a student encountering dangerous creatures for the first time. He opened a secure communication channel to Federation intelligence. If there was more to Yuna's background than her official records showed, they would know about it. 3 decks below, Jiho could not sleep. He kept replaying the scene on the moon in his mind, watching Yuna move with lethal grace toward the Spider Queen. The image bothered him in ways he could not explain. He decided to take a walk through the station's quieter sections to clear his head. The late shift meant most areas were dimly lit and nearly empty. His footsteps echoed softly in the metal corridors as he made his way toward the hydroponics bay. The bay was one of his favorite places on the station. Rows of earth plants grew under artificial sunlight, creating a small piece of home in the vast emptiness of space. The air smelled like soil and growing things, a welcome change from the recycled atmosphere of the rest of the station. He was surprised to find someone else there at this late hour. Yuna stood among the tomato plants, examining their leaves with the same careful attention she gave her class notes. She looked up when she heard his footsteps. Could not sleep either. She asked softly. "The moon keeps coming back to me," Jiho admitted. "What we saw today was incredible." Yuna nodded, returning her attention to the plants. Nature can be surprising. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, surrounded by the gentle hum of the growing systems. Then the lights suddenly went out, plunging the bay into complete darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on a moment later, casting red shadows across the rows of plants. A harsh alarm began blaring throughout the station. "Automated defense systems have malfunctioned," came an announcement over the communication system. "All personnel should remain in their quarters until the situation is resolved." Through the bay's viewing windows, Jiho could see combat drones moving through the corridors. These security robots were designed to protect the station from hostile boarders. Their weapons could cut through bulkheads and their sensors could track targets in complete darkness. One of the drones appeared at the bay's entrance, its red scanning beam sweeping across the room. When it detected the 2 students, weapon systems activated with mechanical precision. Jiho froze in terror as the drone's gun swiveled toward them, but Yuna moved immediately, grabbing a metal plant support rod from a nearby growing tray. The drone fired, sending energy bolts scorching through the air where they had been standing. Yuna pushed Jiho behind a row of plants and rolled in the opposite direction. The drone's targeting system tried to track both heat signatures but struggled with the abundance of warm-growing plants surrounding them. Yuna moved through the hydroponics bay like she owned it. She used the plant rows as cover, staying low and moving in patterns that confused the drone's sensors. When she reached the irrigation system controls, she quickly modified the water pressure settings. High-pressure jets of water erupted from multiple nozzles, striking the drone from several angles. The robot's electrical systems sparked and shorted out as water penetrated its armor joints. Before the drone could recover, Yuna was behind it with her improvised weapon. She struck specific points on its hull with precise force, disabling its motor systems and weapon controls. The machine collapsed to the floor, completely neutralized. Jiho emerged from his hiding place, staring at her in the red emergency lighting. She stood over the disabled drone, breathing normally and showing no signs of stress from the encounter. "Who are you really?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper in the darkness. Yuna looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes reflecting the emergency lights. For the first time since he had known her, her careful mask seemed to slip slightly. "Someone who keeps the galaxy safe from things that hunt in the dark," she whispered back. Then she walked past him toward the bay's exit, leaving Jiho alone with more questions than ever before. The first ship disappeared on a Tuesday morning during routine supply runs between the Academy Station and the inner planets. The cargo vessel simply vanished from all tracking systems while traveling through what had been considered a safe shipping lane for over 50 years. Captain Hyun stood in the station's command center, studying the empty space on his tactical display where the ship should have been. His weathered face showed the concern of someone who had seen too many unexplained disappearances in his years of service. "Any distress signals?" he asked his communications officer. Nothing, sir. The ship was transmitting normal status reports right up until it vanished. Then complete silence. By the end of the week, 3 more vessels had disappeared in the same general area. Merchant ships, passenger transports, even a Federation patrol cruiser. All of them simply gone without any trace or explanation. Professor Vexthor called an emergency faculty meeting to discuss the situation. The disappearances were happening too close to the academy for anyone to feel comfortable. Students and staff began talking about evacuation procedures and emergency protocols. Yuna attended her classes as normal, taking notes and sitting quietly in her usual back corner seat. But Guillaume noticed that she seemed more alert than usual. Her dark eyes tracked the conversations around her with sharp attention, and she asked more questions about the missing ships than she typically asked about anything. The shipping lanes in this sector have been stable for decades, she said during one discussion. What could cause multiple ships to disappear so quickly and completely? Professor Vexthor's yellow eyes focused on her with interest. What do you think might be responsible, Miss Yuna? She paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. Something large enough to take entire ships. Something that hunts in deep space where normal sensors cannot detect it properly. The answer came on Friday evening when long-range sensors detected massive organic signatures moving through the outer system. The creatures were enormous, larger than most battleships, with long tentacles that stretched for kilometers through the void of space. Void Krakens, Captain Hyun announced grimly during an emergency broadcast to the entire station. We have confirmed the presence of at least 3 adult specimens in our local space. Fear spread through the station like wildfire. Void Krakens were legendary creatures, spoken of in whispers by deep space crews and military veterans. They were older than most civilizations, predators that had been hunting among the stars since before the Federation existed. The creatures could crush battleships with their massive tentacles. Their psychic abilities could disable electronic systems and drive crews insane with terror. Most importantly, they were intelligent. They did not just attack randomly like wild animals. They planned, they hunted, they learned from their encounters. The emergency alarm started blaring throughout the station just after midnight. A student transport ship carrying 20 young beings from various worlds had sent out a desperate distress call. They were under attack by one of the Void Krakens, drifting helpless in a debris field from other destroyed vessels. Captain Hyun assembled his best rescue team in the main hangar bay. Security officers checked their weapons while engineers prepared specialized equipment for dealing with psychic interference. The rescue ship's pilot ran through emergency procedures with nervous efficiency. This is a volunteer mission only, Captain Hyun announced to the assembled crew. Void Krakens are classified as apex predators. Anyone who wants to withdraw can do so now with no questions asked. Several crew members stepped back. Fighting space pirates or dealing with equipment failures was one thing. Facing a creature that could destroy their minds before crushing their bodies was something else entirely. A quiet voice came from the back of the hangar bay. I volunteer. Everyone turned to see Yuna walking forward through the crowd. She wore simple civilian clothes and carried a small equipment bag, looking completely out of place among the armed security officers and emergency technicians. Miss, this is not a place for students, Captain Hyun said gently but firmly. These creatures are extremely dangerous. Yuna stopped in front of him and looked up with those calm dark eyes that had been watching everything for months. I have hunted Void Krakens before, she said quietly. The hangar bay fell completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's systems seemed to pause. Captain Hyun stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the equipment bag she carried. It was not a standard student supply pack. The materials visible through the partially open zipper were not textbooks or sample collection tools. What exactly are you carrying in that bag? He asked slowly. Yuna's expression remained perfectly calm as she answered. Equipment designed specifically for hunting apex predators in deep space. The rescue ship moved through space toward the distress signal with deadly silence. Captain Hyun sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls despite the sweat on his forehead. Behind him, 6 security officers checked their weapons for the third time in 10 minutes. Yuna sat quietly in the back of the ship, her equipment bag open on her lap. The contents were unlike anything the crew had ever seen. Strange devices hummed with soft energy. Pieces of armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapons that looked like they had been designed for purposes no civilian would understand. "Contact in 30 seconds, the ship's scanner operator announced. His voice carried a tremor that he tried to hide. Through the front windows, they could see the debris field ahead. Twisted metal from destroyed ships floated in the void like a graveyard of broken dreams. In the center of the wreckage, a small student transport ship drifted helplessly, its engines dark and its hull cracked in several places. "I am detecting the void Kraken," the scanner operator continued. "It is directly behind the transport ship. Massive biosignatures. The creature is at least 800 meters long." Captain Hyun activated the communication system. "Student transport. This is Academy Rescue 1. Please respond." Static filled the channel for several long seconds. Then a weak voice came through, barely audible above the interference. "Rescue ship, we have multiple injuries and our engines are completely disabled. The creature is still here. It is waiting for something." That was when the nightmare began. The void Kraken revealed itself slowly, rising from behind the damaged transport like a mountain of living flesh emerging from dark water. Its massive tentacles stretched in all directions, each one thick as a city building and covered in suckers that could grip the hull of a battleship. But the worst part was not its size. The worst part was the sound it made. The psychic scream hit their ship like a physical blow. It was not something they heard with their ears. It was something that invaded their minds directly, filling their thoughts with terror so pure and overwhelming that rational thought became impossible. The security officers collapsed to the floor, clutching their heads and crying out in languages from their homeworlds. The scanner operator's hands shook so badly he could not work his controls. Captain Hyun fought to stay conscious as waves of fear crashed through his mind like a hurricane. Only Yuna remained unaffected. She sat calmly in her seat as chaos erupted around her, watching the massive creature through the ship's windows with steady dark eyes. When she tilted her head slightly, small lights could be seen flickering beneath her skin, just behind her ears. Neural implants. Devices designed specifically to block psychic interference. "Stay calm," she said to the terrified crew, her voice cutting through their panic like a blade through silk. "The fear is not real. It is just psychic manipulation." Captain Hyun looked at her through eyes wide with terror and confusion. "How are you not affected?" Yuna stood up slowly, pulling items from her equipment bag with practiced efficiency. "Because I am part of humanity's silent service. We are trained to hunt things that cannot be killed by normal military forces." She began putting on pieces of armor that seemed to drink in the light around them. Each piece fit perfectly, like it had been made specifically for her body. The armor was covered in small marks that looked like tally marks, hundreds of them arranged in neat rows. "Silent service," Captain Hyun managed to ask through the psychic assault. "Elite hunters," Yuna explained as she checked weapons that hummed with lethal energy. "We eliminate threats too dangerous for conventional forces to handle. Creatures that could destabilize galactic civilization if they were allowed to multiply or organize." She sealed her helmet and activated systems that made her armor glow with soft blue light. "My academic career was a cover mission. I was sent here to study alien psychology and identify potential threats within the Federation." The Void Kraken's tentacles began reaching toward their ship, drawn by the emotions radiating from the terrified crew. Each tentacle was covered in sensors that could detect fear and pain from vast distances. Yuna walked toward the ship's airlock, carrying weapons that looked like they had been designed by nightmares. "Stay on the ship," she told the crew. "Keep the engines running and be ready to evacuate the students from the transport." Captain Hyun struggled to speak through the creature's psychic assault. "Where are you going?" Yuna paused at the airlock controls, her armored figure reflected in the metal surfaces around her. "To do what humans do best," she said quietly. "Hunt something that everyone else thinks cannot be hunted." The airlock cycled open, and she stepped out into the void of space where the ancient predator waited. Space around the debris field became a battlefield unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Yuna floated in the void between twisted metal and broken ships, her dark armor making her nearly invisible against the star-filled darkness. Small thrusters on her suit allowed her to move with perfect control through the zero-gravity environment. The Void Kraken turned its massive attention toward this tiny figure that dared to approach it directly. The creature was ancient beyond measure, older than most civilizations, and it had never encountered prey that willingly entered its domain without fear. Tentacles thick as starship hulls reached toward Yuna with surprising speed. Each one was covered in sensors that could detect the smallest movement and strong enough to crush battle cruisers. The creature expected this small being to flee or freeze in terror like all the others. Instead, Yuna moved like liquid shadow through the reaching appendages. She used pieces of debris as stepping stones, pushing off from floating chunks of destroyed ships to change direction in ways that confused the creature's targeting. When a massive tentacle swept through the space where she had been, she was already somewhere else, moving with calculated precision toward her goal. The Kraken's psychic scream intensified, trying to overwhelm this strange prey with waves of pure terror. But Yuna's neural implants protected her mind completely. The creature might as well have been trying to frighten a piece of metal. She reached into her equipment pack and pulled out devices that began beeping softly. They were small, no larger than her fist, but they hummed with energy that made the space around them shimmer like heat waves. Neural disruptors, weapons designed specifically to interfere with the bioelectric systems that powered creatures like void krakens. Yuna began placing the devices on different pieces of debris throughout the field. Each one was positioned with mathematical precision, forming a pattern that would create overlapping fields of disruptive energy. She moved from wreck to wreck like a ghost, always staying ahead of the creature's grasping tentacles. The Void Kraken grew frustrated with this prey that refused to behave like prey. It began using its tentacles to grab chunks of debris and hurl them through space, trying to crush the small figure that danced between its attacks. But Yuna had been expecting this. She used the creature's own weapons against it, timing her movements so that the thrown debris created barriers and cover points. When a section of destroyed cruiser came spinning toward her, she grabbed onto it and rode it like a surfboard, using its momentum to reach positions the creature had not anticipated. The beast's massive body followed her movements, trying to anticipate where she would appear next. But Yuna was not moving randomly. Every action was part of a larger plan that the ancient predator could not understand. She activated more devices as she moved, each one adding to the growing network of energy fields surrounding the creature. The Void Kraken began to sense something was wrong. Its psychic abilities started to flicker as the neural disruptors interfered with its bioelectric systems. 20 minutes into the hunt, Yuna reached the position she had been working toward since the beginning. She floated near the creature's massive head, close enough to see the alien intelligence burning in its eyes like purple stars. The Void Kraken finally realized what was happening. The small prey had not been running from it. She had been hurting it, positioning it exactly where she wanted it to be. All the neural disruptors activated at once. The effect was immediate and devastating. Energy fields designed to disrupt nervous systems created a cage of invisible force around the massive creature. Its tentacles began spasming as signals from its brain became scrambled and confused. The psychic scream that had terrorized star systems for millions of years became a whisper, then silence. Yuna drew her final weapon, a device that looked almost organic in design. It was covered in the same tally marks as her armor, evidence of how many times it had been used for its deadly purpose. She moved toward the creature's head with the same calm precision she had shown in every action since leaving the rescue ship. The Void Kraken's eyes tracked her movement, but its body could no longer obey its commands. "You have been hunting in this galaxy for a very long time," Yuna said softly, her voice carrying through her suit's external speakers. But you made one mistake. She reached the exact spot she needed, floating just above the creature's neural center. You chose to hunt in human space. The weapon in Yuna's hands pulsed with energy that seemed to bend the very fabric of space around it. She positioned herself directly above the Void Kraken's massive head, where its neural center lay protected beneath layers of organic armor that had evolved over millions of years. The creature's eyes, each one larger than a shuttlecraft, stared up at her with alien intelligence. In those depths, she could see the knowledge of countless civilizations it had destroyed. Entire star systems had fallen to its hunger over the eons. Yuna activated the final sequence on her weapon. The device hummed with power that drew energy from the neural disruptors she had placed throughout the debris field. All of her preparation, all of her careful positioning, had led to this single moment. "This is for every ship you destroyed," she said quietly, "and for every civilization that never got the chance to grow because you hunted them to extinction." She pressed the weapon against the creature's neural center and triggered the final discharge. The effect was immediate and absolute. The Void Kraken's massive body shuddered once, then went completely still. Its tentacles, which had been reaching for her even through the neural disruption, fell limp and began drifting in the zero gravity. The death cry that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard. It was not a sound but a psychic wave that rippled outward through space, carrying with it the creature's final moment of awareness. Every sentient being within 100 light years felt the echo of that ancient mind finally going silent. On the rescue ship, Captain Hyun and his crew watched in stunned silence as the massive predator that had terrorized their nightmares simply stopped moving. "Is it dead?" one of the security officers whispered, his voice barely audible. Captain Hyun checked his scanners with shaking hands. "All biosigns have ceased. The creature is no longer alive." Through the ship's windows, they could see Yuna floating motionless beside the Kraken's head. Her dark armor made her look like a tiny shadow against the creature's massive bulk. She remained there for several long minutes, as if paying respect to a worthy opponent. Then she activated her thrusters and began moving toward the damaged student transport ship. The rescue operation that followed was swift and efficient. Yuna helped evacuate 20 young beings from 12 different species, treating their injuries and calming their fears with the same gentle precision she had used to kill their tormentor. The students looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and terror. They had seen what she was capable of doing to threats, and now they understood that the quiet girl from their academy was something far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. "Thank you," whispered a young Kepler student whose arm had been broken when the Kraken first attacked their ship. "You saved all of us." Yuna helped secure the student in the rescue ship's medical bay. "It is what I do," she replied softly. Back on the Academy station, word of what had happened spread faster than subspace communications. The news that a human student had single-handedly killed a Void Kraken sent shockwaves through every level of galactic society. Professor Vexthor stood in the station's main communication center, fielding calls from Federation officials, military commanders, and intelligence agencies. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. How many more humans like Yuna were out there, hidden among the general population? The answer came in the form of an encrypted message from Earth's government. It was brief and to the point. Humanity's silent service operates with the full knowledge and authorization of the Federation Council. Our hunters are positioned throughout known space to deal with threats that conventional forces cannot handle. We suggest you treat this information with appropriate discretion. Professor Vexthor read the message 3 times before its full implications sank in. Humanity had not joined the Federation as equals seeking protection and advancement. They had joined as guardians, taking on the responsibility of hunting the things that hunted everyone else. Kethera found herself in the station's observation lounge, staring out at the debris field where the Void Kraken's body still floated among the wreckage. The creature that had seemed so massive and terrifying now looked small and fragile against the vastness of space. "We never knew," she said to Naline, who floated beside her in her mobile tank. "All this time, We thought humans were the weak ones, the ones who needed protection. Naline's large eyes reflected the distant stars. Perhaps that was the point. Predators are most effective when their prey does not know they are being hunted. The question that nobody wanted to ask hung in the air between them. What other threats had humanity been quietly eliminating while the rest of the galaxy slept peacefully in their beds? 3 weeks after the Void Kraken incident, life on the Academy station had settled into a new kind of normal. Federation officials had come and gone, asking questions and reviewing classified files. Military commanders had studied the recorded footage of Yuna's hunt with professional interest. Scientists had examined the Kraken's remains to learn more about creatures they had only known through legend. Through it all, Yuna had answered their questions with the same quiet patience she had shown in her xenobiology classes. The Federation Council made their decision on a Thursday morning. Rather than reassigning her to active military duty or exposing more of humanity's silent service operations, they chose to keep her exactly where she was. Your mission was to study alien psychology and identify potential threats, Captain Hyun explained during their private meeting. The Council believes that mission is more valuable now than ever before. Yuna nodded calmly. I understand. My cover may be blown, but my work here is not finished. There is one change, Captain Hyun continued. You will also serve as a consultant on apex predator encounters. Your expertise could save lives throughout the Federation. When Yuna returned to her advanced xenobiology class the following Monday, the atmosphere was completely different. Students who had once ignored her now watched her every movement with careful attention. The insectoid students clicked their mandibles respectfully when she passed. Even the aquatic species oriented their tanks to keep her in view. Professor Vexthor had restructured his curriculum to include practical survival techniques alongside theoretical knowledge. Understanding alien life forms is not enough, he explained to the class. You must also know how to survive encounters with the dangerous ones. He gestured toward Yuna, who sat in her usual back corner seat. Miss Yuna will be assisting with these practical lessons, drawing from her field experience. The first few classes were awkward. Students who had once seen her as just another quiet human now knew she was capable of killing creatures that could destroy battleships. They spoke to her with the same nervous respect they might show to a loaded weapon. But gradually things began to change. When Kethera struggled with understanding crystal spider behavioral patterns, Yuna quietly helped her with detailed explanations that came from direct experience. When other students had questions about surviving in hostile environments, she provided practical advice that could keep them alive. You are not as frightening as I thought you would be, Kethera admitted one day after class. I mean, knowing what you can do should make me afraid. But you are still just you. Yuna smiled at that. I am still the same person I was before. You just know more about me now. The biggest change came from an unexpected source. Professor Minna, who taught advanced alien psychology, revealed herself as Yuna's primary handler during a faculty meeting that sent ripples through the academic community. How many of you are there? Professor Vexthor asked during a private conversation. Professor Minna's expression remained neutral. That information is classified. But I can tell you that humanity takes its responsibilities seriously. We protect this galaxy from threats that most species cannot even imagine. The semester continued with a strange new rhythm. Yuna attended her classes, took her notes, and helped other students with their studies. But now she also consulted with station security on potential threats and advised Federation forces on handling dangerous creatures. One evening, as artificial sunset painted the station's corridors in golden light, Chiho found the courage to approach her again. She was in the observation lounge, reading a textbook about interspecies communication theory. So, he said, settling into the chair beside her, coffee sometime. Yuna looked up from her book, and for the first time in months, her smile reached her eyes. I would like that, she said softly. But fair warning. What kind of warning? Joe asked, though he was already smiling back. I am not really a quiet girl, she replied, closing her textbook. "I am just a very patient hunter." They walked together down the station corridor, past students and faculty who nodded respectfully as they passed. The quiet girl from xenobiology class was quiet no more, but she had found something she had not expected when she first arrived at the academy. She had found a place where she could be both protector and student, hunter and friend. In the vast darkness of space, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy, Yuna had discovered that even the most dangerous predators could find a home among those they were sworn to protect.